I'd like to start, before we do anything else, by just recording our thanks to the CST for managing our security this evening. They're incredible people, and we're really fortunate to have them, so thank you. We're also honoured to be joined by several Rabbonim this evening. It's a privilege for Yachad to have your commitment and support. We know that it's not always easy to balance competing opinions about Israel within congregations, and we never take your support for granted. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we all gather in support of Yachad, an organisation that works tirelessly in support of a secure, peaceful and vibrant future for Israelis and Palestinians. We can't meet without addressing the traumatic events of October the 7th. As advocates for peace and justice, we unequivocally condemn the terrorist acts of Hamas on that fateful day and since. The heinous loss of life and the perpetuation of violence serve only to deepen the chasm of pain and mistrust between communities, making the path to reconciliation ever more challenging. Yachad empowers British Jews to support a political resolution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Our focus is advocating for a resolution to the conflict, as we believe that only through a political resolution will the Israel that we love thrive and prosper alongside a future viable and independent Palestinian state. Yachad believes that the occupation, which denies millions of Palestinians their basic civil and political rights, must end if a resolution to the conflict is to be achieved. The continued death and destruction in Gaza is not achieving security for Israel. It isn't bringing us closer to a release of the hostages that we all desire. And it isn't bringing anyone closer to long-term resolutions. This cycle of violence only begets more suffering, impacting both Israelis and Palestinians caught in the crossfire. The plight of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza and innocent Palestinians caught in a war underscores the need for a political resolution that honours the dignity and rights of all innocent individuals involved. We must not ignore the escalating crisis in the West Bank, where extremist settlers are able to terrorise Palestinians unfettered by the police or the IDF. This situation has been exacerbated by the Israeli government's extraordinary decision to put the territory's oversight in the hands of ultra-right-wing politicians with criminal records for their own actions in the very same place. Such developments are not only deeply concerning, but also counterproductive to the aspirations for peace and justice in the region. They underscore the urgent need for responsible governance and accountability, ensuring the safety and rights of all people living in the area. The past 8 months have highlighted the extent and importance of Yachad's work, whether through the countless media appearances representing different perspectives in community settings like the Board of Deputies, where we're members, or the thousands and thousands of people across all generations of the community, including those in youth movements and students on campus who've taken part in our events and campaigning work. The high level of engagement in our activities highlights the increasingly large numbers of the mainstream community that we represent. Today, our reach in Parliament, which spreads across the political spectrum, and our relationships with civil society partners in Israel, they're both stronger than ever. Yachad is a trusted partner and an advisor to them. Tonight, we welcome our distinguished guests. Magan, Hamza, Alex and Rula, your presence here is testament to the belief that dialogue and understanding can pave the way to a lasting peace. Each of you represents the possibility of a future where compassion and empathy triumph over conflict and despair. Ladies and gentlemen, later you're going to be asked to donate. Please do so generously. We are entirely funded by you. And so with your financial support, we can represent your voice in the community to our MPs and support our partners in Israel. The funds we raise and the conversations we have tonight are critical steps towards building a future where Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security. Let's be inspired by the resilience of all of those living in the shadow of the conflict and commit ourselves in our own way to be agents of change, peace and reconciliation. I'd like to just take this opportunity to extend my thanks to Hannah and to the entire team at Yachad, Danielle, John, Eleanor, Dalia, Raphael and Michal. They've worked tirelessly to make this evening possible, and they achieve incredible results every day. Their dedication and hard work are the backbone of our success. I'd also like to express my gratitude to my fellow board members who bring their wisdom, energy and support, enriching Yachad with their invaluable contributions. I'd like to remind you all that you're all welcome to enjoy drinks and food and to mingle afterwards. Please do. Thank you for being here tonight. Your presence is a powerful statement of solidarity and a beacon of hope for a better future. Despite everything that stands against it today, let us still envision a future where peace is not just an aspiration, but a tangible reality for Israelis and Palestinians alike. And with that, I'd like to welcome Hannah, the Executive Director of Yachad, to introduce our guests. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, Simon. And I was going to do something which maybe is not normal, which is to start with the thank yous, because I think by the end of this evening there won't be time for them. And I just wanted to start by actually thanking Simon and our board, who don't get paid for what they do like the staff do, and do it tirelessly and with real dedication. And the last 8 months, for obvious reasons, have been particularly challenging, and we are extremely grateful for everything they do for the organisation. And I also want to reiterate my personal thanks to the team, who have taken a lot of marching orders over the last 8 months, often in very competing directions at a very fast pace. And it has been tough and challenging and emotionally difficult at times, but they have really taken it in their stride, and it is really a pleasure for me to work with them every day. And just a small additional note of thanks to John, who has been sweating it, making tonight happen, and so he deserves a particular thanks this evening. And finally, before we get going, a thank you to all of you. Lots of you I know, some of you I don't. But really, it's been a tough year. But what has been amazing for us is the level of support that you have continued to give us. And actually, not only have you given it to us, but you've really stepped it up. And you've really made it possible for us as Yachad to do what we do. And we do not take that for granted. And it is really amazing to be in such a full room, in a sold-out room, to see the level of solidarity we have from all of you. So thank you very much. Now the thanks are over, the biggest perk of my job is the people that I get to work with every day. And Alex and I spent 4 days a few months ago in the occupied Palestinian territories in Israel. And when I came home quite tired, and my husband handed me 2 children, I said to him, you know, it's funny really, because when I take a step back, it's actually amazing, the people that I get to meet and the people I get to see and spend time with. And you don't always get the opportunity to share that with other people. And really the purpose of tonight is to do that, to share with all of you, Rula, who is on the screen, who hopefully can see us, Magen and Hamza and Alex. So just some very brief introductions, and then we will get into the conversation. I'm going to read your biographies, because otherwise I will introduce you terribly. So to my, in no particular political order, to my far left is Magen Inon. So Magen, as lots of you will have now met him, is a London-based father of 3 from Israel, who is an educator and holds a PhD in the philosophy of education. He's worked in various domains to cultivate liberal values and leadership skills, including with students at university and in school, with high-ranking military officers, young adults and inmates. Magen's parents were murdered on Nativat Asara, a moshav very close to the border, I think the closest community to the border of Gaza, on October the 7th. And since October the 7th, Magen has become one of the leading voices for peace between Israelis and Palestinians here in the UK, in the international media, and with local communities across the country. And it is a real honour for us that Magen, we will definitely talk about this later, that Magen has chosen to spend some of his time working with Yachad. Next to Magen is Hamza Awadeh. Hamza is a Ramallah-based Palestinian. He's a peace activist and conflict resolution expert. He holds a master's degree in global community development from the Hebrew University. And maybe later you can tell me the story, tell these guys the story you just told me about how you ended up at the Hebrew University. And a business degree from Biz 8 University. Hamza's family were displaced in 1948, and since then have been heavily impacted by ongoing violence. His grandfather was a fighter who was killed in 1978, and his cousin was recently shot by the IDF in Dura, which is in the southern West Bank. And for the last 12 years, he's been committed to leading programs that bring Jewish Israelis and Palestinians together, and believes that those directly impacted by the conflict do not have the luxury of being extremists. On the screen, Rula, can you see us? Yes. So on the screen is Rula Dutwood. So Rula is the national co-director of Standing Together and a speech therapist by profession. She's a Palestinian citizen of Israel, born and raised in the Galilee in a village called Kfar Yassif. And Rula began her activism in her home city and later became involved in promoting Jewish-Arab partnership in mixed Jewish-Arab cities. And before joining Standing Together, which we will talk about later, she worked as a community organizer, running events and protests that drew hundreds of activists. And sitting to my left is Alex Sobel, who has instructed me to tell you that he was an MP until last Friday, and is no longer an MP, but hopes to be an MP again on July the 4th. So he was the MP for Leeds North West from 2017 until 30th of May, and he will now be running to be an MP in a new constituency called Leeds Central and Headingley. Is that right? Yes. Alex has served in the Shadow Cabinet in several ministerial positions, nature, recovery and the domestic environment, and Shadow Minister for Arts, Heritage and Tourism. Alex is the one MP that we had in the last sitting of Parliament who had heritage from Israel. His parents moved here from Israel in 1971 and moved to Leeds, where Alex was born and brought up in the area that he now used to represent. So really the purpose of this evening is to, I guess, do something which doesn't happen very often, which is witness a conversation between Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, members of parliament, and to do something which has almost become, I think, impossible, or feels like it might be impossible. And what has been amazing for me, actually, having worked with you all quite closely over the last 8 months, is we've been on lots of real journeys in some cases, and metaphorical ones in others, but lots of journeys together, and some of you with each other. And something that really I was thinking about all of you, and what was the thread that linked you all apart from your interaction with the conflict. But the thing that you all have in common is that on October the 8th, you all knew exactly what to do about what had happened on October the 7th and what was about to happen. And actually it's quite amazing to hear your stories, because it's almost like it was programmed in your DNA, that you knew how you had to respond to the scene that was unfolding, and a very devastating one, and it continues to be so. And I really wanted to ask you, Magen, to start with you, because I looked at my phone today to check when we first made contact, which was on October the 26th, so less than 3 weeks after your parents were murdered. And exactly 2 weeks after that, on November the 7th, so a month after they were killed, I took you to Parliament and sat you in a room with Layla Moran, who was supposed to be here this evening, who is an MP whose mother is Palestinian, and she is running again to be the MP again in Oxford. And I sat you in a room with Layla, who hosted you, and actually the anecdote is that Layla and Magen taught in the same school, they then subsequently found out. And there may be a picture that appears of you doing this, but you sat in a room with probably 50 MPs who marched in, and we do lots of events in Parliament. You don't get 50 MPs walking in a room very often. And if you can see this, the room was absolutely full. I don't know how well you can see that, but the room was absolutely full.
It's me at the back.
Alex is there at the back.
Next to Margaret
But
Hodge.
what you can't see is sitting kind of here, were people sitting on the floor. And you don't often see MPs sitting on the floor either. And they asked Miguel a whole load of questions, ranging from his personal story to how he thought they could solve the conflict from Westminster. And I just wanted to ask you, the decision you made to so quickly in the face of such personal tragedy, to change the course of your life, stop being a teacher and start this journey doing that. How did you make that decision?
Okay, easy one to start. Luckily, I resigned in the summer, so I was looking for something to do.
Possibly not this?
Yes. There was a moment, so for me it wasn't clear on October 8th. I went to Israel on October 8th to spend Shiva with my siblings. But we did have this moment, I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, we did have this moment at the last day of the Shiva, which was an insane event that I'm still processing. But we had this moment where we set the 5 siblings together, and we realized 2 things. One, that we're going to get a lot of media attention, partly because my brother and his business already had good relationships with journalists. Many of them came to the Shiva. And we started hearing calls for revenge on the Israeli media, on social media. And we felt, I don't know how to say, like, the duty, maybe even we were very upset that someone is going to hijack our pain for a political agenda that we and our parents completely disagree with. And our way of preventing that was to raise our voice. And so the 5 siblings sat down and we said, okay, what do we want to say? And we were still very much aligned that we were very clear of saying we don't want revenge. We have different ideas maybe about what exactly the military should do in order to provide the security, but we were very clear about, we have this, we want to be very clear that we don't think revenge is the answer. And I think this comes from the way our parents raised us. And especially I'm thinking of my dad, who was the most pragmatic person I've met. He was actually really happy that I'm going to study philosophy, because he said, you'll never find a job and then you'll come back and work with me. But he was the most pragmatic person I know, and I think he would just say, like, what's the point? Like, how would revenge move us into a better future? And I think this kind of thinking is really ingrained in me and my siblings. And so when we felt the need to do something, we almost immediately thought, okay, what's the pragmatic thing to do? And for us it was, okay, in the short term is saying we don't want revenge, we want the hostages back, we want a ceasefire, and definitely, even if that was, there's a lot of uncertainties at the present moment, but definitely if we look 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, things become very clear that what the IDF was like the strongest military in the region wasn't strong enough to protect my parents. So pragmatically, in order to protect people in Israel, protect people like my parents in the village next to the border, what you need is a political solution. Again, for us it's almost obvious, and because it's not obvious to many others, I feel the need to say it and raise that voice. And definitely, I'm quite impressed by politicians here in the UK. They actually listen. at least pretend well, which is very different than Israeli politicians. And so I'm glad that so many came, and they were very, very attentive. I was very impressed by that and felt as if that's very meaningful to do.
Something that you talked to us about was when you sat Shiva in Israel with your family, that first of all, that you were the first people from your community to do it before, I mean, many, many months before you even buried your parents, but that you went and you sat in Nazareth, you went to a Palestinian city because you had so many relationships, you know, the family has so many relationships with Palestinians, and that they felt that they couldn't come to you, and so you went to them.
Yes, so I already came back to London to be with my kids here, but my family, it would have been October 15, something around that, did like a Shiva day in Nazareth. My brother had a business there for 20 years. I lived there for a while. The whole family has very good connections there. And because like our closest friends from there came to the Shiva to spend some time with us, but many of them said, you know, we're just scared. The tension in Israel at the time was so intense. Everything was so intense. They felt scared leaving Nazareth, going to the road, and just afraid of what might happen. And so we had a day there where people from the community came to pay their condolences to my family.
And just one final thing, because I want to it's a good segue to ask Rudy something, but I think, am I right in saying that you told me that the only two MKs, members of Knesset, that called your family were Ahmed Tibi and Ayman Odeh?
Yeah.
So yeah.
During the Shiva, we had no representative of the Israeli government, no elected politician, apart from Ahmed Tibi and Ayman Odeh, who know my brother through his business and other activists. They were the only one who called and said that they're sorry for what happened.
Which, for many reasons, is quite an amazing thing.
Yeah, again, felt very natural. I mean, I know it sounds like a weird anecdote, but for us, felt very natural because that's the family. Those are the kind of connection my family has in Israel, and the kind of life my parents lived. So for us, it was obvious that they called.
Yeah. So I should say, sorry, in case people don't know who they are, Ahmed Tibi and Ayman Odeh are probably the two most well-known members of Knesset that come from the Palestinian Arab community in Israel. Mm-hmm. Which is actually a good segue, because I wanted to actually come to Rula, who, I'm sorry we've kept you waiting, and you are 2 hours in front, so I've really apologized, because Rula's got many other things she needs to be doing. And I really wanted to ask you, because until October the 8th, Omdim B'Yachad had obviously been standing together, and I'm going to let you explain what standing together does, but you had been working in Israeli society in support of conflict resolution and end to occupation, but also on many other issues to do with social justice, the national minimum wage, climate change. And on October the 8th, everything you were doing became obviously about the war. And what is really unique about Standing Together is that it's an organisation that is co-led by Rula and Alon Lee Green, so Palestinian and Jewish citizens of Israel. And you straight away took people out onto the streets. And I wondered if you could explain how you made that decision to do that, but also how it felt for you, bearing in mind what Magen has just said, that so many of their friends Palestinian friends didn't feel that they could even leave Nazareth. How it felt for you as the Palestinian leader of an organisation to put yourself really in the public domain.
Yeah, well, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. I think the 7th of October, I think each and everyone, if you would ask people, how did you wake up at 6:30 in the morning, everybody would give you, a different description. I woke up to sirens, and I didn't understand there were sirens, because in our unfortunate reality, once we have a war, we know a war is coming. There's a build-up to that war. They talk about it before this, but the 7th of October was a very different day. And I think seeing, seeing the pictures, the videos of what happened after the Hamas attack, and after, a day after when the Israeli government started the retaliation and bombing in Gaza, the other thing that happened is there was immediately a persecution of Palestinian citizens inside of Israel, of anybody who would speak anything against the war, of anybody who would ask for this war to stop, or for even people who would talk about the suffering in Gaza. The freedom of speech is very fast limited, very fast inside of Israeli society, once we have a war. And it's not a thing that we see for the first time. It is the politics that we live through and with for so many years, unfortunately. But the fact that we get asked this question a lot. The fact is that we live in a society that there is no really other choices. It's either we stand up and we fight for what we believe in, and we fight for the soul of the society that we live in. We struggle together to guard our mutual, communities that we've worked so hard on building, and it is a very hard work to do in the Israeli society. Or either we sit back home and do nothing and let other, I would say, lunatic, fanatic, governmental people, and especially politicians who right away got up and started speaking about conquering Gaza, about transferring 2.2 million Palestinians from Gaza, and to taking everybody who would say anything into jail. And I think the third day of this war, the first thing we did as a movement was to give people, to give activists, to give staff members of Standing Together a place, a secure place, a place where they can share what's been happening, because too much happened at the 7th of October and 2 days after the 7th of October. And we understood that we needed to give a legitimacy to these feelings, to understanding that the fear is mutual, the anger is mutual, and it is okay to cry over people, because when you look at Standing Together at this movement, you're basically looking at the community that we live in the society that we live in. We have people activists who lost their families to the Hamas attack on the 7th of October. We had activists who lost family members from Gaza that they haven't seen for years. And we've had other members who had their, friends or family members go to the army to fight in Gaza while they didn't really want to do that. And we also had some real known figures persecuted and taken to jail. And all of that happened during just 1 week of the war, 1 week after the 7th of October. So we needed to give people an assurance that they are still within a movement that has both Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel who believe that there is another way, that the way of this government is not what we are calling for. Our government, the one that we have right now, is speaking a very clear language of continuing this war, of, they say it a lot, eradicating Hamas. But we understand that no military action will eradicate Hamas. It does the contrary. What it does is that it makes Hamas stronger, basically. And we do understand that, look, this is, I think, the 12th war between Israel and Hamas, and nothing has really changed. The only thing that's changed is the numbers of people who have lost their lives. And the only one who pay are the civilians, are innocent people who haven't chosen this reality. So we understand that there is another way. We have seen countless wars, unfortunately, again, being led, but all of them take us to the same point. Hamas becoming stronger. Hamas still stays in charge within Gaza, and the society that we live in, unfortunately, becomes more radical. We believe, as a movement, as a progressive grassroots movement, that when we are focused on building a political will within our society, within the people we live in, when we are focused on building an alternative that people can choose from, because the only thing people hear right now within the Israeli society are very loud voices of conquering Gaza. These are not the voices that we need. We need other voices who truly believe that a shared future is possible. And it comes from, a simple fact. It is a very simple fact. On this land that we call Israel-Palestine, you have two people living. You have the Jewish people and you have the Palestinian people. And nobody is going anywhere. That is a fact. So what we need to understand is that we need agreements. We need political agreements. We need a ceasefire right now. We need this war to stop the starvation, the killing, the destruction within Gaza, and to bring back the hostages alive, and to start thinking about how do we really rebuild from this point on. Because again, a very simple fact, nobody is leaving. This is home for all the people who are living here, and we need a future where we don't just survive, where we can also prosper. And that idea is a fundamental belief and ideology within standing together. The people who form this huge movement, and the basic, thing that happened since the 7th of October that also gave us hope is that as a grassroots movement, we've grown. Many people looked at what was happening and they said the Israeli society is becoming more radical. More people are going to the right. People are becoming more fascist. But the fact that we have grown huge in numbers, we've had more activists joining us, both Jews and Palestinian, says that there are other people who chose to go, left, who chose to speak about solutions, who chose to speak about partnership, who chose to go out to the streets each and every week after the 7th of October to demand a stop of this war, which means we do still have hope. And our exact and real job is to really build a political will within our society, because the Israeli society is the hegemonic force. If the Israeli society does not believe that we need peace and we need agreements, nothing can really change. And that is the main work we are doing. That is a very fundamental belief within standing together. And I think it is the basic thing that enabled us to stand up, to act, to go to the streets, to keep on demonstrating each and every week, to have youth campaigns, to try to make a difference, to support students, to support activists, to have a humanitarian guard, to continue demonstrating with the hostages' families. If we hadn't had that movement and these people believing in what we see as the solution for this future, we wouldn't be able to continue after the 7th of October, because it was a horrific day, and 8 months after, it's not becoming any easier. So we need people to go on and fight for a different future, and that is what we are building within Standing Together.
Thank you, Rula. I could listen to you talk all day about what you're doing. Hamza, I wanted to come to you and ask you. So Magen said that on October the 8th, he was making his way back to Israel, and October the 8th, you were leaving Ramallah, having decided that it was too dangerous to stay because you knew what was going to happen. And I just wondered if you could tell us why you made that decision to leave. And you're currently in Italy, where your partner's family are. But
sure. So actually, maybe I never told anyone, but many months before that, I was in Washington, D.C., and I met with a senior position in the American administration. And we had the drinks, and he told me, if I were you, I would leave, because every time I go to Israel and Palestine, I meet with Bibi and Abbas, I feel so sorry for you guys. Seriously. And I was like, yeah, it is bad, but it's not too bad. Like, it's still bearable. So on October 5th, I had an incident in Ramallah with my son where we were close to be killed by the army. And then when October 7th happened, I connected the dots. Like, this is like an escalation that has been building, in my opinion. Like, maybe we're not talking about, but things on the ground were gradually going worse, and the talks in the media is also escalating, and this is a trend. So if I am fair to my son, he doesn't want to be a hero in this environment. I will take him somewhere safe, and we happen both to also have Italian citizenship. So so like it started October 7th when I was in Dura. I slept the October 6th to 7th at my mom's house in Dura in the south of Hebron, which is very close to Gaza. My family hears every bombing that happens in Gaza. And I woke up on the sounds of rockets. And I wanted just to go back to Ramallah because I knew there would be a war. And if I don't move quickly, I will be stuck in Dura and my son will be away from his mom. Like the most important time for him to be with his mom is when there's a war. So I was going back to Ramallah, and after I reached Ramallah, I knew about the full story. I knew this is it's a very serious danger that will change everything. It can be something that will transform everything to something better, but I don't know who will lead this process. Like, I don't know, we don't have leaders who can take advantage of such a crisis to create an opportunity. I know people who will use it to make things even worse. So I was like, I want to be out. I will take my son to Italy. I don't want to care about all of this. I worked for peace for all my life. I did my job. Whatever happens, happens. And I went to Italy. But then I saw an interview with Maoz, his brother, Magen's brother, and also Jonathan. What's his last name?
Zygon.
Zygon.
Yes. And I was like, so shocked that there are people who are brave and courageous. Because if you were in Israel and Palestine at that moment, and you have something good to say, you shut up. Because everything around you is so toxic, you can't say something rational or something positive. You can't. And I saw that they were courageous and they said these things. And I said, maybe there is something here that I can try, explore. So when I was invited by you to come to the vigil, I was like, I give it a try. And it really felt so, it was not a show. As a Palestinian, it's very important for me, every space I go to, that there are people who stand for at least minimum common values. And I felt it, and I'm glad that I broke the ice for many other Palestinians and also many other Israelis who after seeing me, they felt, okay, like somebody is normalizing this.
So just to explain, because that was going to be my next question to you, is that I was given Hamza's phone number. We decided, as we Yachad decided, that there was so much polarization and so much anger and hurt and no space for people to come together across divides, that we needed to create a space where people could literally gather in person and say we stand in support of innocent lives that have been caught up in this conflict, and actually at a very basic level we stand in support of peace. And we did a trial with Alex and Magen and Layla Amira Awad, who was also going to be here this evening, who some of you may know as a Palestinian Israeli citizen and quite a famous musician, in November. And we very quickly gathered together a lot of people outside Downing Street, and then we said, okay, let's do something much bigger, and we'll do a much bigger event outside Downing Street again in December. And I was given your phone number by a mutual colleague of ours, Jess, who I think might be here tonight, who works for Solutions Not Sides. And I called you up and I said, you don't know me, but can you come and speak at this vigil? And we're going to put you on stage next to Magen. And it was actually amazing because you said to me, and I remember exactly where I was sitting in a cafe on Baker Street trying to talk to you, and you said, yeah, I'll come. This is really important for me and I will do it. And I couldn't believe actually that you said yes so quickly, because it's not an easy thing to say yes to. And it can't have been easy for you to justify to people why you were prepared to stand in central London outside the Prime Minister's house next to an Israeli like you did. I mean, that must have been a very hard thing to explain to people. Yeah. Bearing in mind, sorry, just to say that it's now December and the war is raging. I mean, really, by then there are tens of thousands of people dying in Gaza.
Yeah. So I always saw the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a game between the radicals and the liberals. And they normalized atrocities, and we can normalize also like the most civilized behaviors. Seriously, it's a game. It's a game. First time they killed a civilian, we all have been angry, and then became normal. And also for us, we can do the same. First time we show Israeli-Palestinian together with their full humanity, will shock people, and then we make it the normal thing. Like, why not? Like, it's of course they're humans, And this is my strategy. I had limitation when I lived in Palestine that for safety concerns, because I was living under the Israeli occupation, the Palestinian Authority, and the society that is very toxic politics. But that I was in Italy, for me, was like, now I have no excuse. Now I have no excuse, because if it's not us, then who will do it? Like, also, someone has to start this. And I got the invitation to start it, so for me it was really an honor. Like, I was lucky to have the chance to do it. And I was so happy to see afterwards many Palestinians who told me, like after I did it, that it was courage, they wouldn't have done it, but that I did it, they now can do it. And it is for me, it was written in Europe for sure. It's not Israelis against Palestinians. I am Palestinian, I'm proud Palestinian. But actually what affects our life is some crazy ideologies that has no connection to reality, but enforced with power and violence over people who understand that life is something different. Like, to live is not to occupy or to kill or avenge. This is not part of beauty of life. Life is totally different.
And I should say that this picture, which I love, of Miguel and Hamza, it's the first time they met. We're standing on that stage in central London, and you can't see the whole picture, but what I just found quite funny is that not only did they stand on stage and talk about their similarities, they were also wearing the same clothes, dressed in a uniform. But what has been amazing to see, Miguel and Hamza have done, and maybe we'll talk about it later, but they've done tons of work together over the past 8 months, out on university campuses here, in different communities, and actually the first time they met, in fact, the first time the three of us on a phone call, on a Zoom call one Saturday afternoon, where I said, okay, you're going to speak at this vigil together. I know you don't know each other very well, but what about if we write an op-ed published to both of your names in the Times that we publish in the week before the vigil? And we sat on a call, Miguel and Hamza having met for the first time, and wrote this op-ed, which then ran in the Times. And some of you might have seen, there's tons, if you can go home and look on YouTube, but there is absolutely tons of, here you go, this is their op-ed. There is tons of footage of them on a whole variety of very high-profile news shows talking together. And I suspect now it feels weird that you only met each other 8 months ago. Alex, last but by no means least, of course, I also looked through our messages to see what we had been exchanging in the days after October the 7th, and I have to just, not that it relates to the question I want to ask you, but I found this particular one, which was on October the 17th, which is not funny, but in the cold light of day 8 months later, you wrote to me, I understand that Gantz demanded an exit plan before he joined the government. Well, for those of you who are following this closely, Gantz is still demanding his exit plan and has now given Netanyahu until June the 8th to give him one. So, unfortunately, that exit plan has not really come into fruition. I
mean, Gantz's exit plan should be exit the government. That's
yes.
Gantz's exit plan, but that's another.
But other than the messages about Gantz joining the government, we were discussing what could possibly happen in Parliament and was there any possibility of carving out any kind of moderate space. And we came up with this idea that you, being the only MP in Parliament who has Israeli heritage, and Layla, who sadly is not with us tonight, being the only MP in Parliament with Palestinian heritage, that maybe that, and sitting in different political parties, I should say, because Alex was a Labour member of Parliament and Layla was an MP for the Lib Dems, that there was something quite powerful about the two of you speaking together. And actually, one of the first things that happened was that an op-ed that you and Layla wrote that we spent quite a lot of time talking about, that was published in The Guardian, which I think reverberated quite strongly, because suddenly they're moving from this very febrile debate, and very kind of shouty and aggressive debate, there were suddenly these two MPs that were not only crossing the political divide, but were crossing the divide as people of Israeli and Palestinian heritage. And I just wondered whether you could tell us, kind of pre-October the 7th and post-October the 7th, how this debate has looked to you in Parliament as an MP, and how it changed, and why, I guess, you felt the need to kind of reach out and do this work with Layla.
I mean, October 7th did change everything. So I think pre-October the 7th, the world actually is a less secure place. in the last 5 to 10 years than it has been for quite a while. And there are lots of conflicts now around the world, and there's lots of autocrats, there's lots of bad actors in lots of countries. And Israel-Palestine and trying to secure a two-state solution is something, that my father was in the army, in the IDF, in 67, then left in 68 and was a founding member of SIAC, and they were the first group to call for two-state solution because the occupation of West Bank and Gaza had begun. And so my family have been trying to stimulate a two-state solution for the entire time, really, of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And we've had minimal success, if we're honest. And so this was a long drawn-out occupation with a long drawn-out political timeline, with many false starts, and that's where we were before October 7th. There wasn't any immediate prospect of two-state solution. We were sort of stuck in a pattern of containment with Hamas in Gaza and, frankly, a weak Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Ramallah. And so we were all thinking about ways of who to support, how do you stimulate civil society, how do you stimulate new political actors in Palestine, where's the leadership going to come from in Israel to get us to this point. Then October the 7th happened, and it wasn't something that looked like over a long timeline. It was something then that became immediate because it was a political process that got stuck. But then we were in a very violent military phase where people's families were violently murdered, and then there was a military operation, and now we're seeing and have been, and it said more than 7 months on there, and that's how long we've been going this of tens of thousands of civilians being killed. And I was on the doorstep saying gold is green, and people said to me, oh, politics doesn't mean anything, doesn't change anything. What they don't realise is if we don't believe in the power of politics, the alternative is what we're now seeing in Gaza. It's violence, it's drones and artillery and tanks and guns. The only alternative, politics. And so the difference is we need politics to work, and we need to foster the political actors to get us to the place we need it to work. I am absolutely delighted that Yair Golan was elected to lead the Israeli Labour Party, because in Israel, if we're really honest about this, if you haven't served in the military in a senior position and you have no credibility, if you're coming from the left, you have to have credibility from a military background. But he was a member of the Knesset. He is a man of peace. So we are beginning to see. And actually, people like Ruler, Alon Lee, Yori, I am absolutely bowled over by what they've done. The last 2 weeks I've seen every day they've been going to the West Bank, and they've been standing on the border with Jordan, and they've been protecting hundreds of trucks that have been coming through with aid for Gaza, because the settlers have been turning the trucks back or destroying the aid. What sort of savages can destroy aid going to feed people that are starving in a war zone? But they've been protecting that. They're absolute heroes. And that's where we can foster that politics of hope. We need to look for the places, and we need to encourage it. And sort of finally on this point, it just seems very difficult. But I grew up in this country, obviously, and my whole childhood and early adulthood was dominated by the fact that my parents worked for the Ministry of Defence. And there was a group of people who viewed that those who worked for the Ministry of Defence, the United Kingdom government, were the enemy. And so every day my father would have to go and look under the car, see if there's a bomb under the car. Nobody does that now, because we created a political solution in Northern Ireland through the Good Friday Agreement, through the negotiations. And although there are tensions, I'm not saying there's not, but the violence has ended. And it wasn't just about those in the Republican or the Unionist community in Northern Ireland. It was also about us here in Britain. It was about the Irish government, and it was about the Americans, So it also gives me some hope that we in the international community can have some bearing on this. It isn't just about, it's predominantly about people in Israel and in Palestine, but also we have a role to play.
So just to pick up on that, one of the things that you had, and you mentioned this, is, because I'm keen to open it up to conversation between the four of you, is that, you know, how you foster that different type of environment. And Alex has been probably the biggest champion in Parliament of the work that Rula is doing with Standing Together. And for you, why you see that as being so important, that you want to give a voice to people like Rula and her colleagues in Standing Together, and give them that platform. Yeah. And actually, when Rula and Uri were here in December, I think we might have a few photos of them, and they came into Parliament, and actually one of the funny things is that they spoke in Parliament, and then there was a debate the next day, and one of the MPs quoted them, and they went back to Israel very happy with a printed copy of Hansard, where they were both mentioned, and they said, "Can we please take the copy?" And actually, so this is Rula and Uri speaking in Parliament. It was Kim, wasn't it? Yes, Kim. And then the next day they met with me, with Wayne David, was the shadow Middle East minister. For Labour, and is actually standing down and won't be running again. And Uri left his office holding Wayne's copy of Hansard with his name in it. But I just wondered, I guess it's a question actually both for Alex and Rula, which is why for you it's really important to foster that, and for you, Rula, how you see that sitting in Israel, how important is that for you in terms of supporting the work that you do?
I just want to tell Rula this, and she can take it back to the others. I wrote and signed off my main election leaflet today, and there is a whole paragraph about our trip that we went to Israel and Palestine, and in it the last sentence says, Alex helped establish the UK chapter of Standing Together to foster relationships between Israelis and Palestinians. And that's how important I think Stand Together is, that it's gone in my election leaflet in Leeds, so people understand what Standing Together does. For me, there are beacons of hope, and Standing Together is a beacon of hope. And I know about Standing Together, not since 7th October, I knew about them well before that, because before that, we had an attack on the independent judiciary by Netanyahu, which would have really, in my personal view, if it had gone through to the degree that he wanted to go through, would have taken Israel out of the Democratic Club of Nations, because the rule of law and independence, the rule of law, is a central tenet of democracy. And if you lose that, everything else doesn't really... If you can have elections, even the Chinese have elections. If you haven't got an independent judiciary, then you don't have it. People really respect our country because we have a very strong judiciary, much stronger than the Americans, but we're not here to talk about that tonight. They went and campaigned very successfully on those, and got a lot of people out, and they went to Jerusalem, they went to Tel Aviv, and that was the beginning of the fostering of civil society. And I spoke about it in Parliament, and people said, and I actually had a criticism, why are you talking about this? This is about Israel. And I said, without the independent judiciary, we wouldn't stop the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. We wouldn't be able to open the separation wall so Palestinian farmers could, although I imagine that's probably not happening right now, tend their flocks for the land they own on the other side of the wall. We couldn't restrict the IDF in the South Hebron Hills. The Israeli judicial system is really important for Palestinians as well, particularly Palestinian citizens of Israel. And that is why, it's about having democracy and civil society, but it's also about the conflict.
And for you, Rula, how important is the support you get from people like Alex in a parliament quite far away from where you're currently sitting?
Well, we want each and every support. We very much appreciate the support we get by you. Also the people sitting in the room who want to hear more about us, who want to support our work, who wants to spread our work. As a grassroots movement, we deeply believe that the only ones that can really change the politics, what's really happening, that can take us into a different path, political path, are the people living within the Israeli society. And that is our main work. But we also believe and acknowledge that when we are supported by, other people, when the international community is speaking a language that distinguish between the Israeli government and the people living in Israel, the same as they distinguish between Hamas and Palestinians living in Gaza, they are supporting people at the end of the day. And that is a great distinguish that most politicians didn't know how to do. When people speak about Israel-Palestine, they take one stand. And what we have seen in our region, where we live, is that there is a big difference between our governments and us. And the support we get by you, by Alex, by politicians, by other people is very crucial to our work. It's not because we believe that support from abroad will free us, free the people who are living here, just because we understand that it also gives more legitimization to what we believe in. It puts pressure on politicians. It puts pressure on our government, and it makes more pressure to politicians from both sides to take in a different path, to going into agreements, into political agreements. And that kind of pressure is very crucial and very much needed. And that is why we appreciate a lot every support we get that can pressure our government into taking different politics in the time that we are in right now. Because again, as more people who will understand that this war cannot go on, as more people who will put more pressure on the politicians from both sides to stop this war, we are closer to ending it and to having real peace. But the real question is also, is not just ending this war. The real thing that we want, and I think most people who are with you in this room really want, is to have a real future. And that future can come not just by ending the occupation, not just by stopping this war, by lifting the siege from Gaza, but also by having leadership who would sit down and speak and have the same principles. That both people who are living in Israel, Palestine, deserve freedom, liberty, equality, and yes, independence. And that is the kind of pressure we also need on our politicians and the support to, our ideas and our politics. So for that, we do thank you so much for all of your support.
I'm not sure if you can hear, Rula, but you just had a large round of applause from the audience. Did you want?
Yeah, I just want to
say
sort of come back
quickly?
on a sort of point about that. I think I'm going to make a really practical point here about why working with Standing Together is so important. So, and I sort of forgot about it because the election got called and it sort of wipes your brain. It's a bit like having a child. Everything goes once the baby arrives. The Monday before the election was called, I messaged Alon Lee Green, who is one of the other directors of Standing Together, and said, Alon Lee, can you send me the names of those who are organising these attacks on these aid shipments? And we can then go to the Foreign Office and ask for sanctions and travel bans against these settlers. And he said, we are researching this. He can relax, Rula, until the 5th of July, because we're probably not going to be able to do anything until then. We may, with any luck, have a different foreign secretary. But that's the sort of thing, that's sort of having those links, that sort of practical benefit that somebody like me, as an MP, can have that evidence from Stand Together, take it to the Foreign Office, say, here's the evidence, this is what they're doing, this is a really clear breach of international law, and a very strong case for taking sanctions and travel bans. And when we went to South Hebron Hills, we went to one of the Palestinian villages destroyed by, I've forgotten his name.
In fact, we've got a picture of us
right.
there.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we went to
yeah.
we went to Zanuta, which is this place here, a village in the South Hebron Hills, and this is the school. Well, it was the school, destroyed by a man called Inon Levy, who is a settler, who was sanctioned by the UK government a couple of days before we arrived, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, destroying aid shipments is worse than this. So we definitely need to ensure that we get sanctions, travel bans on those individuals.
I'm just conscious of time, and there's absolutely tons of stuff that I want to ask all of you, which we're not going to be able to get through. But I just wondered, it's very easy to sit here in this room and in this very nice venue, and eat nice food and drink a glass of wine and almost forget about the backdrop of what is happening. And there are fires blazing across the entirety of the north of Israel because of rockets that have been fired from Hezbollah and Lebanon. Last night, there was the announcement that 4 more hostages were killed in captivity. You may or may not know that today, right now, is Erev, the evening before Yom Yerushalayim, which, for those of you who know, is the celebration of the reunification of Jerusalem. And we can expect tomorrow to see very violent marches of nationalist right-wing Jews waving Israeli flags going through the Palestinian parts of East Jerusalem, in particular through the Muslim Quarter. And those marches have become infamous for hurling abuse at Palestinians. And this year, the route is expected to be as normal, and they're planning for everything from violent attacks to rockets, I read, being thrown at the marches. Biden said this afternoon that we have every reason to believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is dragging out the war in Gaza for political reasons, and we are obviously still waiting for an answer on whether the ceasefire agreement proposal that is on the table is going to actually happen. And that list of things is just in the past 24 hours. The picture is really incredibly bleak in some respects. And I guess I really wanted to ask all of you kind of how you feel about how we can best respond to that. Because something that Alex mentioned before was the work that Rula and the team at Standing Together have been doing. So and I think we have got a picture of this, of going out into the West Bank to a place called Tarkumia, a checkpoint, actually guarding the aid trucks that are driving from the West Bank to Gaza that are being destroyed by violent settlers. So this is, I don't know if you can see this, Rula, but we've pulled up one of your tweets. So this is a group of Standing Together activists with Rula on a bus. And what the tweet says is, we are from the camp of life. That, and about less than a week ago, the settlers basically packed their bags and went home, and the trucks are now going kind of fettered from the West Bank to Gaza to feed people in Gaza. So there is obviously something that can be done on the ground right now with people like Rula and activists. But something that you and I, again, have spoken about, and Hamza, you and I were also speaking about this just before, is that the reality is that none of us sitting here in this room have any ability to influence whether the ceasefire deal that is on the table today will be accepted by the people that need to accept it. But we do have power elsewhere. And I just wondered, again, it's interesting for us to hear your take on that where you see there is room for influence and change.
So I think, first of all, we tried to think strategically. What can we do? So I'm not in Israel at the moment. We thought, okay, we have our story. We can try and honor our parents' memory by using it to bring good into the world. And I think what we realize is something we can do and is really needed now is to create hope. I think I'm quoting Hamza here, where I really like when you said, hope is not something you have or you don't have. It's an action. You have to create it. And if there's no hope, okay, so we need to create it. And I think by working together with Hamza and other partners, modeling the kind of future that we want to see. And just not to be too abstract, Hamza has a son, Taher, is now 7. Adam is 7, my eldest son. When Hamza came to our house, I remember you were walking, maybe you came with me to take Adam from school, and Adam asked Hamza, where are you from? And Hamza said, Palestine. And Adam, 7-year-old, said, Palestine is the most stupid country in the world. And I think Hamza said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Hamza said, some would say that about Israel. Yeah. And like we continued that conversation for a bit, and hopefully soon they can join together and play some football, and just see that they're people. That human beings are human beings, and I think if we can model this kind of relationship to our sons, that's a really good start. And now, how do we, tell the world about it? Okay, so we're doing that on media and in schools and universities. And I think by doing that and just modeling this kind of very natural human behavior of being friends, creates hope for what can be the future in the Middle East. And even if it looks far away at the moment, I think the crisis now also provides opportunities. And there's, Rula can say a bit more, but there's going to be a really large event on July 1st in Israel, like the largest indoor venue in Israel, with 10,000 people in attendance, which is like a restart of the peace camp in Israel. So there's initiatives and there's energy, and we have to be, I think, clear about what we want to see immediately, a deal, but we also should look ahead and say, okay, what do we need to be doing today so in 5 and 10 years from now we're in a different place.
And Hamza, from where you're sitting, where do you think where are the powers? Where do we have power to influence? Where is the leverage?
So the Palestinian side, what I have been witnessing is there's a growing young people perspective that they're very nationalist. They will not compromise about what they deserve, but they think there's a scam here. Like they're not happy about Iran relationship with Hamas. It just feels suspicious for them. They don't care about Israel and Israel opinion or the UK opinion, but for them naturally there's different agenda here and why Hamas and Iran are close to each other. They're very frustrated with the Palestinian Authority ineffectiveness. I mean, it's Palestinian, the PLO stands for nice things. I mean, they stand for secular, democratic, liberal Palestine, but they're so ineffective. And there are independent voices that are, many of them like Khalil, and this has been amazing that for the first time I meet independent Palestinian young people who really want a different way. In one way, they can speak to the Palestinians because they're really nationalists. They're not fraud. They're not spy for Israel. They're not working for the Americans or the British, whatever. They're genuine Palestinians, but they say there are 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians here, and we have to work with whoever is willing to work with us to build a different future. But all these crazy adventures of people like Sinwar and others, it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us, and we have to educate the society that this is wrong. It sounds exciting, especially when you are so powerless. I mean, imagine if you're in Gaza for 17 years in a cage, and now you broke this fence. It sounds exciting. But it makes you happy on the moment, but it's really not constructive at all. So I hope that these voices come up in some new political initiative that can work with Palestinians first, because this is the most important thing. Most of Palestinian liberals had always to work with the externals and please the externals. And after October 7th, there's a tendency that we have to please our own people. Because if our people chant for Hamas, we have lost. Our people have to chant for us, and we have to be accountable to them. And it sees the tragedy and the opportunity also that comes with the tragedy for the long term to have a Palestinian national movement that is loyal to the Palestinian people and their well-being, and that's it.
And I just wanted to ask you one other thing, Hamza, because we were talking about this on the phone a couple of weeks ago and also earlier on this afternoon, which is that you're not shy about your criticisms of Israel and what Israel is doing in Gaza. And one of the things that I have really valued about the relationship that we have with you is to be able to talk to someone who holds really strong opinions, and probably opinions that some people in this room might be offended by, actually. But you'll still come and sit in this room. And obviously, you feel that it's really important to be here. And when I called Hamza and said, "Will you come?" He said, "Yeah, I just have to sort out the childcare problems," which is something that I'm very familiar with. But you sorted out the childcare problems and got on a plane this morning and are getting up tomorrow morning really early to fly back. Why is it important for you to sit and have this conversation while still being able to maintain your position? That is a hard thing to do.
Yeah. So the way I define my position is not the position that you should take, but you should know what's my position.
Yeah.
If I come already compromised, then you never knew what actually my position. So I don't negotiate my story, my history. Like for me, it's very important that I say Nakba was the worst unfair tragedy that happened to the Palestinian people, and they shouldn't have this tragedy, and it was brought on them. You don't have to agree, but you should know that this is what I stand for. And many people think, you have to filter yourself before because of the audience, and you have to adjust to the audience. But we are not saying the truth. We're actually being populist here, because they're telling the audience what they like to hear. But that doesn't mean that I'm not willing, despite the Nakba, to go to reconciliation and to build a joint future. But if there's nothing wrong between us, why we need reconciliation? If I'm not able to talk about Nakba, I'm not able to talk what's going on in Gaza, I'm not able to talk about the occupation, then actually there's no problem between us. We should just love each other. But obviously there is a problem, there is tension, there is discomfort on both sides. And we have to face the truth with courage, but also think about the future. It's 70% about the future and 30% about the past, but you cannot deny people pain and history. And it's like, would Megan like it if I say, no, your parents were not killed and this is all not true, and you have to convince me and you have to negotiate with me this? No, it's not a good start. I have to acknowledge his pain, the way he said. And even if he says Palestinians are terrorists, this is his truth. This is his truth. And I come with my truth, and then we think in the future how to move forward. This is my vision after trying, I have been in this for many years. And I have done the way when I was accommodating. And you don't change people because you don't stand for anything anymore, because you're accommodating them. You are them now.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we're running out of time, and I'm really enjoying talking to you, but I'm sure at some point the audience might get a bit bored of listening to me ask you questions. But I wanted to, I guess, draw this to a close and actually ask, bring it back to Yachad and why we're all sitting in the room. And I actually wanted to ask you, Alex, as the Member of Parliament, and Alex, I have to say, I owe a thanks to Alex, because it was Alex who said to me, in about November, we should take a delegation to Israel-Palestine. We should take a delegation. And I said, yeah, okay, there's a lot of things that we need to do right now, but yes, we'll talk about that later. And then on December the 23rd, he said to me, we should take a delegation, and we need to go in February recess, which is in 6 weeks' time. And I said, Alex, there's no way that we can go in February recess. We don't have any money. We haven't recruited the MPs. And he kept on saying we need to take one. And by January the 3rd, we were taking a delegation in February recess, largely because Alex wouldn't stop messaging me about it. And actually, it was really important for us that we took that delegation. I think the Yachad delegation that went to Israel-Palestine in February recess was the first parliamentary delegation that went. There were parliamentarians that went to Israel, a couple. But it was the first delegation that went out, and I suspect still the only delegation that has gone out that went both to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. And we took 5 MPs and 1 Lord, of which Alex was one. And actually this picture here, if you can see it, this is in Kibbutz Be'eri. So you saw the picture from Zanuta, the village that was destroyed by violent settlers. And just a side anecdote, we are standing, I don't know if you can see, but the guy with long hair and a red shirt here is a young man called Yotam Kipnis. And Yotam's parents were murdered on October the 7th, and we're standing outside his parents' house, which is just here. And Yotam hadn't been back to Be'eri since his parents were murdered, and the first time he came back was with us that day, which was an really unbelievably humbling experience, I think, for all of us. And I just have to read you this quote because it was just quite remarkable that we went into the house next door. There was 2 rows of houses. Everybody had been murdered in all the houses, apart from one family who lived next door to his parents, who had come back to the kibbutz, and they were living not in their house, which was destroyed, but somewhere else on the kibbutz. And the father and the son took us into their home, and they showed us their destroyed home and talked about what had happened to them on October the 7th. And while we were in that house, Yossam went into his parents' home for the first time, saw what had happened to his parents' home, and he then came out and he stood here for about 15 minutes talking to a group of MPs. I mean, I have never experienced anything like that. And actually, when a couple of days after we came back, there was one of the big ceasefire debates in Parliament, and Helen, who's one of the MPs who came with us, quoted something that Yossam said in these 15 minutes after he just walked out of his parents' house. And he said, vengeance is a valid feeling. It is not a valid policy. And those words have really rung in my ears since we met Yossam, and it's very similar to some of the things that I've spoken to him again about. But that is a side note, because the thing that I felt that I couldn't show that picture and not tell that story, but the thing I really wanted to ask you is why you feel that Yachad's voice is so important in Parliament, and why you were so keen to get us out on the ground.
I mean, first of all, I'd like to thank all the people here who gave money so we could go on that trip, because I'm sure they're all sat in the room. Look, I mean, in the last 18 months, I've been to Ukraine 3 times and with you to Israel and Palestine, and you can't really talk about conflict and war and people dying sat in the Westminster bubble and just think that you're an expert, just sat there with all the other MPs and peers and reading the newspapers and watching the telly. You can only really talk about it with any real knowledge, having gone and seen it. And actually, when we were at Kibbutz Be'eri, we could see the drones going overhead. We could see the smoke. Every 2 or 3 minutes there was a big thud, and that was an artillery shell landing in Gaza City. And you can't go to debate and speak about it and vote on it really with knowing that you're admittedly we're not making decisions about peace and war in the UK Parliament. We're just voting on a position of the UK Parliament, but still we need to take it in the same level of seriousness that we were. But you can't do it through that prism, through the prism of the media, through the prism of political debate. You really need to go and see it firsthand. And Yachad are really one of the only organisations in this space that has the credibility to do that. And I know you were going to take another delegation out, but we've got this little election thing.
July the 7th.
July the 7th, so people might not be able to go on July the 7th, but there will be another delegation out soon. And if you want members of Parliament, and we're going to have a lot of new members of Parliament shortly, to be able to go to Parliament and one, be able to talk about it with knowledge, and two, vote the right way and do the right thing, then they need to have been on trips like the trip we went on. And that's a lot of work for you, Hannah, but I'm sure you're up to the task of taking several hundred MPs over.
No problem. Again, I just wanted to, we do need to draw things to a close, and I just wanted to ask you, you live in Belsize Park, and our offices, for those of you who don't know, the Yachad offices are in Kentish Town, which is just down the road from where you live, and we share our office space with our very dear friends at the New Israel Fund. And between us and the New Israel Fund team, there are 12, 14 members of staff walking around that office, of which probably now 50% are Israelis originally. So we have a real mix of Hebrew and English constantly being spoken in our office. Lots of discussion about, obviously, the politics of what's going on. And Megan is now basically part of the furniture of the office, so he's in the mix with all the staff. But on October the 6th, you didn't even know we were there. And I just wondered, for you, I guess, you found us and we found you, and that's a great relationship that we have. But for you, how important is it to have that, to be part of that community that we have created here of, that are sitting in this room tonight?
People keep asking, what do I do now? Which I'm not sure what to answer. But one thing I do answer and feel very comfortable saying is that I work with Yachad. And I think it was, for me, a very natural connection to start working with an organization that shares my values and helps me, in line with what I said before, just amplify my voice. So there was no way for me, even with my personal story, to get into a room with 50 MPs without Yachad. Or being in front of 5,000 people with Hamza at the vigil. So again, feels very meaningful. Or in the event, I don't know if anyone been in October that we did or in November in JW3. So just feels very, very natural and very meaningful. So I think it's much more than a job, but definitely as a job, what more can I ask? And also, like the staff was very welcoming, and I think now, being an Israeli speaking Hebrew, we've also started to. I don't know how many Hebrew speakers are in the house today, but I think there's a large and growing. Sadly, because the situation in Israel is deteriorating over the last 10, 15 years or so or more, there's a large and growing Israeli community in the UK, and many of them share our values. And so now we're trying to build those connections and grow that network of support that hopefully will join us. Many of them will join us next year as well. So again, just feels very natural and very welcoming environment.
And just finally, Hamza and Rula, you're both Palestinian, so a citizen of Israel and a Palestinian resident of the West Bank. And for you to build a connection and a relationship with Hamza, with a Jewish organisation in the UK doing the work we do, and I guess to be sitting in this room tonight, for you, why is that a thing that you would want to do?
No, quite honestly, it's you're a stakeholder in the Palestinian cause. You are one of the most important people that I want to make sure that you are well informed and that you understand that there's no contradiction between your connection to Israel and connection to Palestine. It's very important to keep this channel open and explain all the time and update each other. Obviously for Palestinians it's important to reach out to all the communities, but the Jewish people are the first most important community to win, because Jewish people are not naturally against us, literally, and they have seen it in practice. And I always reach out, in everything I do, there are Jewish people I speak with because they are scared, frustrated, disappointed as much as me. We are in it together, whether we choose it or not. So it is really the rational thing to do.
And finally, Rula, you're on the ground and it's now 11:15 and we've kept you for a really long time. So I'm going to let you have the last word and ask you, you've got lots of supporters all around the world, and obviously a significant amount of that support has come from Jewish communities, progressive parts of the global Jewish diaspora, and how significant that support is for you as people on the ground fighting every day for change.
Well, I think all support is very significant. There's something we say back home. We started saying when they ask us, why do you do what you're doing? Why do you build political will? And how do you really do it? And we answer back by saying that, politics is all about competition. And when you say competition, it's not just about convincing other people what you're doing, but also making other people join you into the struggle you are leading. And that is a competition that you can win once you have more people joining you and believing in what you believe in, what you want to achieve. And when we have such big support from all communities, whether it's a Jewish community, Palestinian community, Arab communities abroad. It means that we have more competition to the other side, to right-wing fascists who believe that from the river to the sea it belongs to just one nation, one people. That kind of support is very crucial for our work. And again, thank you so much for the work you are doing. Thank you for bringing our work to the ears and the eyes of other people, especially people sitting right now in the room, but also other communities, because again, to build power, to have more people with you is not it's not an easy task, but to have that support of other people in other communities, and yes, especially the Jewish community, means that there are other voices who believe in what we believe, voices that do understand that the only solution we can have here is a solution of real peace, of equality, of liberty, and yes, of independence of the both people who are living in Israel and Palestine. So that is why this is very important for us, all of your support.
Thank you. Before I ask all of you to give these brilliant people a round of applause, I wanted to just say a couple of closing words, which is firstly, Yachad is not party political, and therefore we don't support one political party, but we do hope that Alex personally is re-elected on July the 4th and that we can continue working with him. But really what we wanted to do this evening was to give you some hope, that we have been living through some very hopeless times, and I find these people very inspiring and very hopeful. And Magen and Hamza, you talked about the need to kind of actively create hope, and I wanted to actually just leave you, if I can read you these words without crying, which I have tried to do many times and struggled, that, with the words of a woman called Rachel Goldberg, who Alex and I met in Israel. Her son Hirsch has been held captive by Hamas since October the 7th, and she has become quite famous, and he is quite famous. So he's an American Israeli citizen that was taken with his arm blown off into Gaza. And Rachel has been speaking day in, day out to the media, and we met her in Jerusalem, and she is the most remarkable woman I've ever met. And she is tiny and fills the room with her fortitude and dignity, and how she speaks in such a compelling way. And she was asked by the MPs in the room, and I then heard her repeat it a few days later in a media interview, do you think Hirsch is coming home? And she said to us, hope is mandatory. And those words have really rung. I've thought about Rachel Goldberg about 100 times a day since I met her, and I think all the time about those words, that hope is mandatory. And my hope is that these four people this evening have given us a reason, and all of you a reason, to be hopeful. And I really hope that you have enjoyed listening to them, and please join me in a massive round of applause for everything they do. Thank you.
Okay, so basically I'm back because Hannah asked me to ask you for money. Which I'm not sure why she's shy about. She's never shy about anything. So just a couple of words from me. Some of it I've already said before, but I've been in touch with many organizations since October 7th. There's something very special about Yachad. It's a small and very effective organization, which is something that really speaks to me even on like an organization level. The team is amazing, really professional. Just as an example, we were sitting a few weeks ago. Hannah was saying, maybe we need a rally to call for a deal, a hostages deal and a ceasefire. Okay, when would be a good time? In 2 days. And I'm like, really? And in 48 hours, there were 150 people calling for in a rally with really incredible speakers. Just a very powerful moment that happened, and I never thought it's possible to arrange it in such a quick time. It's a very agile organization and really incredible to see. Whenever we teamed up on anything, whether it was speaking with MPs or the vigil in Westminster and other events, I felt as if the organization is really doing an amazing work. And just to be, so growing up to parents from a kibbutz, I was raised never to ask for money. So hopefully you appreciate that the fact that what I'm doing now is quite difficult. But also I really think that the work I'm doing with Yachad is really the best way I can think of honoring my parents' legacy. And any support you can provide to the team would be incredibly good value for money. Yachad needs about $500K a year to operate. Whether you can donate $20K for a delegation of MPs or £100 to put a youth worker on a train to meet students, it's really useful, and it's being used for an excellent cause. Some details. So there's a few people standing, and they can help you with the pledge cards or the online payment system. If you need a Wi-Fi code, the Wi-Fi code is Yachad 2024. Am I forgetting anything? Capital Y. So Yachad with a capital Y, 2024. We'll give you a couple of minutes, and then Simon, who's already here, but we'll give you a couple of minutes. We'll say a few words of thank you at the end. And personally for me, thank you everyone for coming today. Thank you for making this work possible, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.